It's a fairy tale character, or right? What do you call it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a fable character. You have to have complete mastery of Brer Rabbit, any 5 Indian cookbooks. I assume he means American Indian. The Dead Sea. This is what you have to have mastery of. Brer Rabbit. Now, this is, as I look through it, this is Finnegan's Wake. Complete mastery of fables, Brer Rabbit. Any 5 Indian, you got to have 5 Indian cookbooks. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Pat Boutram story, in brackets, you got to know all the words to the album of Pat Boutram, whatever that is. No interest whatsoever in any way in sports, sunshine, deodorant, lipstick, chewing gum, carbon tetrachloride, television, and ice cream. None of that stuff. In short, a wholesome young underground morsel open to suggestion. You know, kids reading this back then, they wouldn't even know what half these words meant.
Yeah.
So what's your conception of a dream girl? An attractive pariah, an IQ well over 228 with complete mastery of Brer Rabbit, any 5 Indian cookbooks, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Pat Boutram story. She got to know all the words to the album. No interest whatsoever in any way in sports, sunshine, deodorant, lipstick, chewing gum, carbon tetrachloride, television, ice cream. Now, you see, it's everything a teenager is interested in. But they used to first describe Zappa as he's turning alienation into an entertainment. So he's taking the alienated kid who can't get a girlfriend and hates all his colleagues in high school and wouldn't like lipstick, chewing gum, television, ice cream. But this is a girl he's looking for. None of that stuff. In short, a wholesome, young, underground morsel open to suggestions. He's willingly saying he wants to hypnotize them. Right?
Yes.
So then, P.S. Are you still there, Roxy?
Yes. I was thinking that he disliked hippies. That's why he mentioned deodorant.
Oh, did you say that he didn't like hippies? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
Well, he didn't, but he started the hippie. He was one of the original hippies, but he was a freak, and then he would quadrophonically play off it. But I forgot to tell you that I read you the interview about Uncle Meat, and it talks about the big amplifier, the car exhaust pipe in the Grand Canyon as an amplifier. Well, in Time magazine, this is the way he presents Uncle Meat, the movie scenario. He says, the authorities have gathered up all the hippies, and he says, including the Mothers of Invention. So he includes himself within the hippie world. Says they've gathered up all the hippies and put them in a concentration camp in the Grand Canyon, I think it is. Now, in the album We're Only for the Money, which comes out before Uncle Meat, but probably Uncle Meat was in his mind for years, the concentration camp is on the moon. That's how he presents it in the Beatles satirical album, We're Only for the Money. But anyways, in Time magazine, he's saying the hippies and everybody are rounded up and put in a concentration camp in Grand Canyon. Now, that is referring to a story that got out around the late 60s that Reagan had brought in a concentration camp legislation. Secret concentration camp legislation for the radicals. Beater talked about it later, May Brussel. So Frank is aware of that. So he's talking about the concentration camp plans of Ronald Reagan in his Time magazine interview, and he's pretending it's a movie. But he's just the movie is him being interviewed and being in Time magazine, right? Instant hologram. So
the
he's taking any
cramps, as they impose it.
Yeah, fever cramps. He's taking whoever shows up, like he says. We're willing to. We'll perform where anybody's paying attention. We're on duty. We're ready to tell you. So he says it's found out that eventually the monster movie guys, King Kong, Rodan, and one of them begins with G. All the monsters show up. So he lists up all the monsters.
Godzilla.
What? Godzilla, yes. Yeah, he lists off about 3 of them. And remember, one of the main songs on the first album is The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet. So now you know the concept, at least the latest concept. These monsters free the hippies from the concentration camp, okay? The ugly monsters are good. They're not bad. They free the hippies. And they say eventually it's found out that the concentration camp was run by a doll, a Colonel Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken guy, a doll version of him in the glove compartment of a hippie Volkswagen bus. That's who ran. It's a little fucking Robotoid. It's a little ESP tarantula from the Outer Limits kind of TV show. It's a doll in the glove compartment of a Volkswagen bus who, when they were in the concentration camp, what were they forced to learn? They had to learn the eternal American verities, the hamburger. They had to study the hamburger and know all about the hamburger. That's what they learned at the concentration camp. And that has changed in World for the Money. It's changed to the name of their crime is carved in their back. So that's one variation. You'll see it's always the same scenario. He decided America was a concentration camp probably when Sputnik went up in 1957 when he was like 16 years old. He put it all together. And he just kept different ways of explaining this, which is McLuhan's global. The hamburger and maybe some other thing he says. And then they're freed. And it's run by a little robot, a little toy doll. Now, that's science fiction, eh? The concentration camp is run by the android meme. It's something not human. Who made the little doll, get into that position? Through sound, through hypnotism.
And through food.
Through food, yes, very important point, food.
Industrial society. Fake food, non-food.
Right. He in the 80s he had a picture of himself, and he had a big cooking glove on one hand. He was in what he called the dangerous kitchen, cooking. And you talked about the studio's art form. I forgot to say on that album, 1973, Overnight Sensation. He has a hand going into the recording studio. A big giant hand is manipulating the recording studio hologram. Meanwhile, Gail, working for the CIA, has saved the world. All right? Nobody told us that. That was said last week, Bert.
Yeah, I heard that. So she really was? That's some...
I don't know. We don't know if Ahmet's gone crazy once Gail has disappeared, faked her death or whatever she did. The son is saying that. But he's blaming it on his uncle. That just hit me. Uncle Meat. He's actually, Ahmet's taking over the conceptual continuity. He's claiming his uncle told him that she was CIA. Now, he's a pretty wild kid, Ahmet, He could be capable of that. He's an actor, musician, and I think he writes books and does voices or something in Hollywood. Anyways, he's in charge of the new merger. Okay, so here's a PS to the dream girl. I don't even care if she shaves her legs. Just about anybody will do if they can dance. Now he starts equivocating. He says, I don't even, after saying all those rules, quadrophenia, he says, I don't even care if she shaves her legs. Just about anybody will do if they can dance. Now, Frank was notorious for not being able to dance, not normal dancing. So just anybody will do if they can dance. I'm not really sure any of this is true. He admits he's lying. Then he says, or not lying, I'll have to check it out a couple times. So he says, I'm not really sure any of this is true in the middle of the interview. I'll have to check it out a couple times. Then he goes, wait, any girl is all right as long as she doesn't have hair like Bob Dylan, or maybe she could even have that if she knows how to ride a motorcycle. I might even like her better if she can play Stockhausen on the piano. And then he names Clavier Stucky number 12. What's Clavier Stucky? Is that a piece or an instrument? Yeah, it's an instrument, right? Clavier
Stucky. Just making fun of the names of the composition.
Right, Clavier Stuck. Yeah, he didn't sing Clavier.
It's piece in German. Clavier
what is it?
Piano.
Piano.
It's a piano.
And what's Stuck?
Number 4. Piece.
No, number 12. Piece. She can play that particular piece. Okay. But look at that. Well, look what he says. I don't even know if any of this is true. I'll have to check it out a couple of times. See, a couple of times. Wait. He goes, wait, any girl is all right as long as she doesn't have hair like Bob Dylan, or maybe she could even have that if she knows how to ride a motorcycle. And then Dylan crashes a few months later on a motorcycle. I might even like her better if she can play Stockhausen on the piano. Now, the thing about Dylan is that when Like a Rolling Stone came out in '65, Zappa, I'll have to find this section and read it. He was jumping up and down. He says, finally, an outsider got on pop radio. He said, this is great for all of us. We can maybe start to get in on regular media. And then he says nobody interpreted Bob Dylan properly. He thought he didn't have to. He said, I thought I don't have to go and infiltrate the music industry. Dylan did it. But then he said everybody misinterpreted Dylan, didn't get it, so he had to come back in and do it, redo Dylan properly. That's what he says. And so he's already come back in and is doing it, so he's making fun of Dylan. Right? He's not impressed anymore. Not that it was Dylan's fault, but that could partly explain him making fun of Dylan. So then the person says, who's your favorite actress? He says, Ida Lupino. Who's your favorite actor? Herman Rudin. I don't know these people. What are your favorite movies? The Killer Shrews, S-H-R-E-W-S. That means mad women, right? The Killer Shrews, The Beast of Haunted Cave, Wasp Woman, Mothra. That was one of the movies that saved the hippies in the concentration camp. Dead of Night, Freaks, that's a famous movie, and Alice in Wonderland. So he names all these obscure movies. What do you do when you are alone? Now, remember the Knives was asking about this guy's being alone. He goes, I am never alone. I have a house with 6 dwarfs who take care of me. The dwarfs change from week to week, so I don't get bored. Now, who's the guy that lived with dwarfs? That was Snow White, right?
Yeah.
And Santa Claus. He's doing me. I'm Santa Claus. He's doing me. He says, but if I ever was alone, I'd probably dance and sing and play my guitar. Oh, boy, would I. I might sew, I might read, I might draw. I might do all that stuff simultaneously. Maybe someday I'll be so rich I can hire people to help me do all those things when I'm alone. Maybe not. I have a lot of fantasies, you see. That's pretty good, eh?
Yeah.
Let me read it again. What do you do when you're alone? I am never alone. I have a house with 6 dwarfs who take care of me. The dwarfs change from week to week. See, that's quadraphenic almost. The dwarfs change from week to week. Now, the dwarfs, he has him pictured on the cover of Lumpy Gravy, his first, classical composition, serious music thing, and he's pictured as a dwarf. He has himself as a dwarf.
I like what he does. He often goes like, he says whatever, and then he cancels that at the end.
Yes, he cancels it.
All the things he said are erased.
Because he doesn't know if they're real. He has to check it out a couple times, so he has to restate it, cancel it several times to even get a sense of reality. Now that's living knowing that the global theater is a virtual environment. It's like thinning its wig. The dwarfs change from week to week so I don't get bored. But if I ever was alone, I'd probably dance and sing and play my guitar. Oh, boy, would I. Now, that's being Rumpelstiltskin. Now, he said his home was decorated in Rumpelstiltskin decor. So he's declaring his Rumpelstiltskinness here. I might sew, I might read, I might draw. Now, look at this. I might do all the stuff simultaneously. Quadraphenic. Maybe someday I'll be so rich I can hire people to help me do all those things when I'm alone. Maybe not. I have a lot of fantasies, you see. So then they go, do you have any secret longings? He says, I long to turn Sunset Boulevard into a parking lot. Joni Mitchell wouldn't like that. And Joni Mitchell played with the Mothers for a couple minutes. He hung out with Frank a little bit. Do you ever date fans? Of course. They're the only ones who like me. I date fans because they like me. How would you describe your personality? Infinitely repellent. Now he knows that's going to be appealing to a certain kind of mentality. What would you like to do on a date? Well, mostly I just like to hold hands, intimately sharing conversation.
Right.
What? Did you puke?
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Now, he's talking to a teen magazine. What would you like to do on a date? Just hold hands, intimately sharing conversation. Who are your closest friends? The ones that are still alive. Now remember, his family died. They lived. So he's talking about how everybody died. Who are your closest ones?
That's very ironic.
That's right.
Yeah.
The ones that are still alive. I keep to myself mostly. Just me and my pup dog, Popo. P-O-P-O. Walking alone together. Look at that. Alone together. Walking alone together all through the canyon. That's Laurel Canyon. What care I for friends? Walking alone together with Popo. What care I for friends? Seriously now. My friends made me promise if I ever got famous not to tell their names. It might get back to them. Something like that on your record could keep you from getting a civil service job. So he's aware of himself as a monster. And, anybody who knew him, he has to keep it quiet. How's that? That's pretty good, eh? Yeah. I mean, he's really got it down how to get the young alienated kids' attention, right? He's actually their best fantasy. Where would you like to live if you get married? What makes you think I'm going to get married? What makes you think I want to be on any street but this street, where the action is? Besides, Popo likes to roam the hills. Good boy, Popo. What are your favorite colors? Avocado green, yellow orange, and robin's egg blue. What are your favorite flowers? Morning glories and honeysuckle. What's your favorite food? Shrimp curry. Who are your favorites in music? In the old days, back before rock and roll was what was happening, I used to go for Sacco and Vanzetti. You know who they are. You know Sacco and Vanzetti? They were the anarchists framed for something and killed hung and killed, executed in the 20s. Sacco and Vanzetti. He used to go for them. So he's aware of news stories and tragic news stories as entertainment, and you become a fan of them, right? Now remember, he studied with an ad agency, worked in an ad agency, so he's really got media awareness of the games played in the information environment. So in the old days, back before rock and roll was what was happening, I used to go for Sacco and Vanzetti. And as I grew up, I found that it got harder and harder to dance to them. Couldn't dance to them. When you get old, coordination is more difficult. I had to switch my preference, and now all I really like is Gary Lewis and the Playboys. Remember them? That's Jerry Lewis's son. The ultimate, pre-Monkeys band. It was a band made up of the sons and daughters of Hollywood stars. So he's saying he likes Gary Lewis and the Playboys, who were big right then, 65, 66. What has been the biggest thrill of your life? The day a high official at a Columbia Records, in confidence to a close friend, revealed the stunning truth that the mother's invention has no commercial potential. Now, I think that was the Don Kirshner, the guy who became the king of mainstream music business. Is it Don Kirshner? I think that was who it was. Now,
yes.
This is before the album comes out, and on the album, in July, a few months later, is that quote. It says, high record person says, "You guys have no commercial potential." So he's saying here, he's planning on making something out of this. He says, the biggest thrill of his life is when a high official at a Columbia Records, in confidence to a close friend, revealed the stunning truth that the mothers of invention has no commercial potential. That's pretty neat. If you were stuck alone on a desert island, name the three things you would most want to have with you. 1, a dozen assorted groupies. 2, the complete writings of Cordwainer Smith. He's a science fiction writer, I think. 3, a carton of cigarettes. What kind of girl would you marry? Now, didn't we get that asked before? Where would you like to live if you get...
Ideal girl. This is the one that he wants to marry.
Yeah, where would you like to live if you get married? Okay. And he's saying the best street is where he's living in Laurel Canyon. What kind of girl would you marry? Now, he'd already been married and divorced. He says on the album, he was with her 5 years, almost ruined her life. And then they split. If I ever get married, I prefer a sterile, deaf mute who likes to wash dishes. There are so many American women who fit that description philosophically, I might as well own one. No, I'd give her to Popo. Your dad probably owns one. I'll go watch his. No, he insults the interviewer. It says that her mother is a deaf-mute, sterile deaf-mute. What kind of girl would you marry? If I ever get married, I prefer a sterile deaf-mute who likes to wash dishes. There are so many American women who fit that description philosophically. I might as well own one. No, I'd give her to Popo.
He will marry you.
He will what?
He will marry you because you do the dishes.
Yes. Oh, I'd be perfect. No, I'd give her to Popo. Your dad probably owns one. A wife. I'll go watch his. How many children do you want to have? 15. What sports do you enjoy? When I was in corrective PE, and he goes, in California, folks, PE means physical education. So when I was in corrective PE, I was really a monster of badminton. Can't say as I enjoyed it much, but if I really had to choose, really, when you come right down to it, it would be badminton, yes? You know, hit the birdie with the racket, although volleyballs smell better. Now, that's interesting. I was talking to Beefheart one day. Oh, let's hope they muted that. And somebody brought up football, and he said, I love football. Whenever I had the ball, it reminded me of my father's shoes. So he's talking about the smell thing. I bet you Zappa got that from Beefheart, or Beefheart got it from Zappa, right? They talked about the tools of sport. They went by the smell of them. So, can't say as I enjoyed being a monster. There's the monster's name at badminton. But if I really had to choose, really, when you come right down to it, it would be badminton, yes, which is pretty stupid sport back then in the 60s, right? You know, hit the birdie with the racket, although volleyballs smell better. What advice would you give young people who wish to go into show business? First thing you do is get vaccinated. Get this? First thing you do is get vaccinated, especially if you live on this hot street. Get vaccinated for every known disease. Are you guys still there?
Yes.
And if you live through those vaccinations, or if you live through that vaccination, go find yourself a rich widow, preferably an ex-PE teacher who will help you buy an amplifier. Barring any. Now, he has a song on Uncle Meat called Aunt Jemima, which is about an amplifier. He says, barring any unforeseen teenage dilemmas, you will probably be relatively unsuccessful and miserable. This is if you go in showbiz. At the most, within 6 months you will be. The best thing to do is real estate or plumbing. We need more long-hair plumbers and realtors. Now, that's what he says in the 1984 address to the university composers. He goes on about how obsolete music is, and you best get a real estate license. Here he is saying that almost 20 years before. Same line. What do you think of that? That's pretty conceptually continuous.
Yes.
So if you want to go into show business, you know, find yourself a rich widow, get vaccinated, get an amplifier, and realize you'll be very unhappy within 6 months. Best thing to do is forget about it, get into real estate or plumbing. Then they ask him, do you personally answer fan mail? He says, I never write letters of any description. Did you like school? I liked school a lot better than school liked me. They kept throwing me out. One day I got tired and tried to drop out of high school, but then they wouldn't let me. Sure did make me mad. He got mad because they wouldn't let him drop. They kept kicking him out, but then when he wanted to leave, they wouldn't let him. A horrible life of a young, alienated kid. What would you like to do if you were not a musician? I once confided in Van Dyke Parks, who was a supposed genius at that time. I once confided in Van Dyke Parks that I would go into real estate, starting first with the purchase of La Cienega Boulevard, in brackets note, a large business street in the center of L.A., including policemen. So he'd buy the boulevard and policemen because Disneyland is too far to drive to. So he would buy the street and the police rather than Disneyland. Who was your favorite male singer? Chester Burnett, known as Howlin' Wolf. All that stuff about Gary Lewis was a cruel put-on. You hear that? You guys are there, right?
That was the other band. Yes, that was the band that he said earlier he was favorite of. That was one of his favorites.
Yes. He loved them.
Yeah.
Now he's saying all that stuff about Gary Lewis was a cruel put-on. Then he goes, really? Next to Howlin' Wolf, I like Ray Collins. Ray Collins was a very good R&B singer who was a member of the Mothers. And was really good at it. But he cancels out the Gary Lewis there, Roxy. What do you think of that? Cancel, like tactility. Hey there, Roxy? Oh, what, she get knocked off and get
Probably. Maybe. Yes.
Maybe what? What's maybe?
Probably. Maybe.
Who, you? You got knocked up?
Right. No.
You probably don't know the phrase knocked up.
No.
I'm just cruel. I'm just being cruel.
I'm just playing the Zappa.
Now, I know you wanted to play some Zappa music. We'll have to get to that. Okay. So look at this question. Well, you're mumbling. Stop lying in the pillow. Move your face away from the pillow. She's starting to faint.
You asked me something, and I'm like, my favorite color is avocado green or whatever.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
What are you saying?
Any.
What? No,
she was
say
knocked
something.
out that time.
Uh-oh. Did you get knocked out?
I think she did that time. It cut out in mid-sentence.
No, I think she's putting us on. I think we insulted her somehow. Insulted her intelligence. There is someone, or maybe that's you, Bert. There's someone speaking through. Oh, wait, they just came back. Ah, there it is. Very good. See? You got knocked off, didn't you? You got your hand up. It says you're waving twice. You're there.
Yes.
Okay. Let's get back into this important, finishing up the interview. A very good question coming up. What do you think of money? Okay. He says, what care I for fortune and fame? Just me and my dog Popo wandering through the hills, fair weather and foul. You know, the good life. I got to confess, I don't have a dog Popo, but I'll bet Kim Fowley does. All the rest of this stuff is true, though. So that's how you define Menippean satire. The original Menippean satire is written over the last 2,000 years. The guy would say, well into it, he said, by the way, everything I've written so far is bullshit. And then later he would say, no, it's actually all true. So he was always canceling that out, right? And that was pretty risque back when writing and printing was a new environment and it was treated sacredly. You didn't fuck around with the truth, right? But a Menippean would.
Yeah.
So he's doing that old Shakespearean cliche, right? What care I for fortune and fame? Just me and my dog Popo wandering through the hills, fair weather and foul. You know, the good life. Then he has to fuck it out. He goes, I got to confess, I don't have a dog Popo, but I'll bet Kim Fowley does. Now, you guys know who Kim Fowley is?
No.
He's a kid. He's a legend, and he in the late 50s got in. I think his parents were famous Hollywood something or in Hollywood, so he had connections. So as a kid, he got into he was part of a group called Alley Oop, or they did the song Alley Oop. Do you remember that song, Alley Oop? Sort of a novelty song. So Kim Fowley, they probably have a documentary on him pretty soon. He was on every scene, and by 1969, say, he bragged that he'd fucked 5,000 groupies by the time he was 30 or something. And so he was a notorious guy and he started a girl band in the 80s. Well, out of it, the girl became a famous guitarist. I can't remember those people, but, well, if I just click, it's all right there. Just click on it. So Kim Fowley actually met Frank Zappa, and he was on, boy, I didn't notice this. He recorded with Gail Zappa as Bunny and Bear. He was with Gail before Frank or something. But he is on Freak Out. He was a guy that Frank would have to deal with. He had charisma in Hollywood before Frank did. Jesus, he just died. I didn't know that. He died on January 15, 2015. Born on McLuhan's birthday, 1939. He was an American record producer, singer, and musician. He's best known for his role behind a string of novelty and cult pop rock singles in the 60s and for managing the Runaways in the 70s. Did you guys know about the Runaways?
No.
That led to the Joan Jett. You know about Joan Jett?
Yes.
Famous 80s, woman guitarist. So she was in the Runaways. So he got them started. Now, we were talking about John Lennon. In addition, he's credited with being the inspiration behind promoter John Brower's call to John Lennon that resulted in the last-minute appearance of the Plastic Ono Band at the Toronto Rock and Roll Revival on September 13, 1969. Remember I was telling you about Ronnie Hawkins and the Peace Campaign? Oh, yeah, that was Rich York, the guy who did the article on Uncle Meat. Well, Kim Fowley had something to do with that event. And Fowley was the MC there. Didn't know that. At this event, Fowley also created the iconic experience of having the audience light matches and lighters to welcome a nervous John Lennon to the stage. He has been described as, quote, one of the most colorful characters in the annals of rock and roll, as well as a shadowy cult figure well outside the margins of the mainstream. Yes, if you go on to YouTube, put in Kim Fowley, Fowley, you'll see some of his interviews. They're pretty, for most people, disgusting. So, up till the death of the end. I mean, now everybody's disgusting, so we don't have those values anymore. But back in the day, he's a risky name, and there's Frank dropping a key name in this interview, right? He drops Kim Fowley. But he says Kim Fowley does have a dog named Popo, and all the rest of this stuff is true, though. Okay, so here comes the final message. Do you have a message for your fans? Yes, call your service. You know what that means?
No.
Call your answering phone service. If you were a Hollywood actor, mobile citizen, you got to have someone taking your phone messages. And also in your showbiz, you have to see who's calling you, what agents are calling you, right? So it's a showbiz thing for me. Immediately call your service, call your agent, all right? And he's saying that to these fans. So is he implying that his only fans are showbiz people? So he said, are you there, Roxy?
Yes.
Okay. So he says, yes, call your service. Also, if I have to admit that there is really a message, really a deep down meaning, really it's this. So here's the message. Every American boy and girl with matching mums... What?
The medium is the message.
Yeah, all right. So look what he said. Let's see if that's close. So he says, if I have to also, first call your service so you can keep putting out software as an entertainment entity. Also, if I have to admit that there is really a message, really a deep down meaning, really it's this. Every American boy and girl with matching mums and dads should walk around every day vehemently screaming, quote, I doubt it. You start screaming, I doubt it, to everything people do or think or say around them. To the whole environment, you must say you doubt it. Now, there's your hologram where we were talking about 2 hours ago. He's looking at the whole environment you're inside of his virtual reality, and you should doubt it. Right? Like Truman, the guy, yes. That movie show, Truman Show. Now he's saying, I doubt it to everything people, not what they say or think, but he says do or say around them. Everything people do or think or say around them. In a nutshell, kids, I want to make sure you get a chance to check it out a couple of times. Because in reality, Madison Avenue does not have your best interests at heart. There he is, ooh. Like McLuhan going after Madison Avenue. The enemy, the bloodline,
yes,
the Android meme.
For example, one of the things that made him interested in Barres was that he read an article, and in the article said it was the worst music in the world.
Was Zappa said this? What are you referring to?
No, he read an article about Barres.
Oh, yeah, that it was the worst music in the world. That's right, and that's why he liked it.
And, yeah, he said, I'm sure that it's really interesting, because he doubted that comment.
Well, he found that Perez was a way of doubting what people thought was music. Is that what you mean?
Yes, like what they tell you is beautiful or ugly, or their definitions. Is why should you accept that as the truth?
Right. The Croker and the postmodern people in the 80s, they talked about everything's disappeared, but now you have the presentation of values, of valuation. So it became culture wars was everybody trying to decide what was beautiful and what was ugly. And I call that mythic stages. Everybody had their historical media preferences, and they held that up as their identity and fought anybody else's identity about what they preferred. So the battle of values.
And at that time, this thing in and out was very in. People.
Yes, you mean yes.
Following what was
in and what was out. And what was out. Right.
Like,
they would list them in magazines.
Zappa was inside.
Zappa was what?
The song, I have been in you, you have been in me.
Oh, yeah. Now, this phrase, matching mums and dads, that means all the mothers and fathers of all the teenagers are the same, right? They all have the same matching
it's like
yeah.
As if their parents were an accessory, like a bag.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's right. He doesn't believe in the nuclear family. Now, look at this. This I doubted. You're supposed to vehemently scream it. You have to scream this to everybody. I doubt it. You say it to the little girl guiding you across the school crosswalk. You yell that at your teachers. I doubt it. It's pretty subversive, right? Every American boy and girl with matching mom and dad should walk around every day vehemently screaming, I doubt it, to everything people do, think, or say around them. In a nutshell, kids, I want to make sure you get a chance to check it out a couple times. On Freakout, I think he's going, yeah, Susie Cream Cheese, we want you to check it out. Or he'll say, I've been checking it out a couple times. So this idea that you check it out more than once is important. I recommend that. If you read a book, you got to read it again. Do everything twice. I want to make sure you get a chance to check it out a couple of times. Really, in reality, Madison Avenue does not have your best interests at heart. As McLuhan said, Madison Avenue was a military operation that attempted to capture the soul, McLuhan said, something like that. So then he goes, because in reality, Madison Avenue does not have your best interests at heart. And then he goes, it's also stunning to note, neither do most mums and dads, the police department, your local city, county, state, and federal governments, your local realtors, none of them. They've got it in for you, kids. This is terrorist talk. And then he says, they would smother you with apathy. Quoting Roxy's earlier point about boredom, they would smother you with apathy. It's up to you to know where it's at, but check it all out a couple of times so that when you open your mouth to nail one of them, you know what you're talking about. This is great advice. This is his first interview. Now, this is what he was saying, that he loved that Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone because finally a hip outsider got into the mainstream media. He saw the real classroom was radio. And if we can only get into the radio environment and then say all this stuff and disguise it as music.
Yeah, he was an infiltrator. Definitely
a communist, a capitalist, a Dobbite, Dobbsian. Who was he working for? Who are the brain police?
For Ion.
He's working for Ion. Ion. That's right. He got his marching orders when he read in the Life magazine about Perez. That's when he was MK Ultra triggered to become working for Bob's CIA. He saw the word ionization like a robot. He bought the album. But look at it. It's really good what he's saying. And he's also telling them, you must review and check. This is silence, exile, and cunning. Joyce's motto. You got to go off and study. You got to study several times, over and over, like Bert. He listens to the Ion stuff 3 or 4 times before he opens his fucking mouth. Find out what the fuck Ion's saying. Before he starts to substitute for Bob and criticize other new neophyte Ionettes that come in here, totally naive, saying the wrong shit. But Bert has checked it out a couple of times, so that when you open your mouth to nail one of them, you know what you're talking about. It's like he knows it's invasion of the body snatchers. Hey, whoever's on there, mute me. Anyways, he goes, moreover, he says, if you get a chance this week, drop out of school before your disinterested, ineffectual teenage educational system wrecks whatever national intelligence you had before all that stuff was inflicted on you. But then he cancels out. He goes, or if that's too much of a hang-up, go work on your car. He gives them the right to cop out and not become ascended. You can do that too.
What was the year of this interview, this article?
It's published in 1966 fanzine. So 66. Don't know what part of the year. I don't know if the album's out. Doesn't say. But it's early, real early. He may not even have his album out. But let's assume he does have the album out, so that's July 66. And so he got attention. Now, this also can be something that he manufactured and sent out to magazines to see if anybody would press it. As part of his, see if they would publish it. This is part of his United Mutations organization. They call themselves United Mutations. And they would get fans to order this free little package of probably information like this. So, stunning to note, he says, Madison Avenue does not have your best interests at heart. Neither do most mums and dads, the police department, your local city, county, state, and federal governments, your local realtors, none of them. They've got it in for you kids. Now, part of the reason he can say all this stuff and not fear about getting drafted, because he'd been put in jail for 10 days and that meant he had a record, so he can't go in the Army. Right? Can't be drafted. So he's free.
Right.
They would smother you with apathy. It's up to you to know where it's at. It's up to you to know where it's at. But check it all out a couple times. So, you have the right to explore it yourself, so that when you open your mouth to nail one of them, you know what you're talking about. Moreover, if you get a chance this week, just this week, drop out of school before your disinterested, ineffectual teenage educational system wrecks whatever natural intelligence you had before all that stuff was inflicted on you. Or if that's too much of a hang-up, go work on your car. Well, he continued to do that program for the next 30 years, 25 years, adapting it to changing media, changing circumstances. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
And apparently that's 54 questions. Now there's another neat interview, which is interesting. You know what? Let me play some music and organize my Zappa music, organize some things here. Is that a good idea?
Yes.
Very good.
Do I get something that you sent me or what, Roxana?
What you like.
All right, but there's something, you sent me stuff that's long, I think.
Yes.
I think I'll just go into my Zappa archive and find something just for, 5 minutes. Since we had John Adams, oh man, what did people, let's see, they've been...
I would say that Zappa went beyond the rock and roll, and he will be a classical of 20th century music composition. When he's actually seen from this angle,
yes,
from the median ecological point of view, and people start getting what he was doing from that point of view.
Post John Cage.
As you can see.
If everything you do is music, then he was composing with all media, like McLuhan, and he was doing performance art right in the public, and he wasn't stuck in the art ghetto. And I will read you an interview around this time, 1967, where he advocates starting up a third political party. He's already running for president. You know, there was this fantasy in the 60s that, man, we have all these kids who will, you know, who we can get to work for us. We could take over and knock out the world over 30. Well, he took that point, and he says it. This, man, we can get all these kids working for us. We can take over, change this society. So he really was a quote, a terrorist in the sophisticated sense. He was an enemy of society. He was Wyndham Lewis's throwback.
He was blasting everything, like.
Yes, yeah. And you know, Dylan wasn't as good. You see those interviews with Dylan. He hates being interviewed. He takes it too personally. He was the first to go in there and get chewed up, but he got bitter, he got pissed off, he could say a few kind of funny lines like he did in the Playboy interview, but he's not as conscious. So Zappa is more conscious because he has the benefits of what happened to Dylan. And he lists Dylan and Joan Baez's influences on his album of 179 names. And he says, please don't hold it against him. But I think
Dylan was obsolete already.
Dylan.
A lot of the hippies were into Dylan, and Zappa is still there.
Well, Dylan knows, as he says in the 80s, media is all there is. He understands that he really got a good instinctive understanding of what McLuhan's saying. The media is the virtual reality is what we're up against, and no ideologies survive, no ideas survive. Everybody got killed. They lived. They lived. Yeah, I never had a chance to meet Roxy's sisters because Roxy told me they lived. They're not around anymore.
They're not going to make it.
Yeah. And hey Bert, are you on Facebook, Bert?
No, I'm not. I'm on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Anyways, if you see my Facebook page, you could see Roxy's guru sister occasionally interjects on there. But she doesn't know that Roxy just said that they ain't going to make it. Well, that's between Roxy and her sister. Right, Roxy? None of our business.
I am for free choice.
Yes, free choice in how you fake using your chemical body.
Yes.
Okay, so John Adams, what? Bert?
I was going to ask Roxana, does her sister know about Bob? Or she just...
she has posted on my Facebook.
Everybody knows about everything because I do everything openly.
Yeah, it's on. All our videos are posted. We don't know. They don't say anything about it. They did. Her guru sister put a hug on my Facebook page when she heard we were going to do the Zappa Hour. Wasn't that the context, Roxy? She liked the Zappa Hour idea.
Yeah.
She put a little silly cartoon.
We're going to be playing only...
yeah, she's going to hate when she hears this. What? They've been on for 3 hours and haven't played one Zappa song. They just been talking bullshit about how they're smarter than Frank.
Yes.
Look, there's somebody on the chat room, they posted, they're laughing heads off because I went, who's the guy who lived with the dwarfs? Snow White, right? They find that quite funny. And they then go, what's your Facebook page called, Bob? What is it called? Bob Dobbs Kihei.
Bob Dobbs.
K-I-H-E-I. Bob Dobbs Kihei, Hawaii. That's how you find it. Just look at the address. There's lots of Bob Dobbs there, but I'm the Kihei guy. Okay, so we're going to play a Zappa song. Think of John Adams. He couldn't stand pop culture, and or he says at the very end we're all forced to live with it, but he has a problem with it. So if I told John Adams that Frank was a better composer than him, and he'd say, prove it, I would play this. Would you have played that to rebut John Adams? Hey? Have you guys been knocked off again?
No, what did you say?
I said, would you guys play that song to rebut John Adams?
Yes.
The American composer. You would play that song. He takes a hit song and then does a better version of it with the group that did the song. Now that's hijacking. He hijacked the Turtles, like Uncle Meat. Stole them. Okay, I want to. I found some good follow-up. We can continue on this analysis. There's this article. Now, this is not the first article, but this is Hit Parader magazine. Now, this is neat. Hit Parader, the teen magazine, June 1967. And they have a picture of Frank, and he's on the phone, but he's unplugging it. It looks like there's a better picture. I've seen it where he's holding the phone up to his ear, but he's holding the plug up on the other hand, so it's obviously unplugged. Here, he's on the phone, but he's unplugging or pointing at something. It's not exactly the picture I know. Anyways, that's the picture he released for this magazine. Okay, everybody there? We're all here, ready to go?
Yeah.
Here's what the art. All right. No, that's not good enough. And maybe you're going to the bathroom or something, but you got to get back here. No speakerphone. So here's what this article. Don Paulson. I don't know who Don Paulson is, but he says Frank Zappa, the incredible boss mother. June 1967. He starts off saying, the most amazing, outrageous, and ambitious rock and roll group anywhere in the universe is the Mothers. Their music, best appreciated in person, combines today's pop sounds with symphonic music, satire, the primitive rock and roll songs in the 1950s, and social commentary. And you can even dance to it. The Mothers were organized by Frank Zappa, an ex-advertising man. Now, Ralph Gleason was a famous social critic in San Francisco in the 60s, 50s and 60s. And when he first saw the Mothers, he hated them. He said, this is an ad man's idea of infiltrating youth culture. So I don't know if he knew Frank was an ex-advertising man, but a father would say, what, an ex-advertising man who's like 20 years older than the kids he's singing for? This guy is obviously a con man. So anyways, the writer says, Frank Zappa, an ex-advertising man who had been writing songs since he was 14 and had experimented with abstract music. Using motivational research principles, Frank created a group unlike anything the world had ever seen. Using, like he admits it, using secret government research. And this is a teen magazine, this guy's writing this. Where did he get these ideas? Using motivational research principles, Frank created a group unlike anything the world had ever seen. Am I still there? I heard a click.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. You have to tell me because this is a susceptible phone. Then he goes, for one thing, they weren't seeking a hit record, hit in quotes. They weren't. And then they quote Frank, our aim is to kill top 40 radio. Certain concessions must be made before a record is playable on the air. I am not in the business to compete with the makers of Hanky Panky. That's like Tommy Shondell or something. Tommy James and the Shondells. That record can be played because it won't hurt anybody. It won't move them either. I'm not writing music like that. I'm a composer, and nobody wanted to hear my music, so I organized the Mothers and did the Freakout album. Now people are listening. Sometimes they wonder what they're hearing and why it sounds like that, but sometimes they like it. Top 40 radio is unethical, unmusical, and it stinks. Now this is great. Top 40 music is great, a lot of it. I mean, when you're old like me, You're not hung up on music. Now, here's an interesting subplot. McLuhan said in the 60s, because we're in a tactile environment, and that was the hidden ground, the ear, or acoustic space, became an art form and a matter of private concern. In other words, people, if you think of art as a Gutenberg private concern, the new role of art was your musical taste. That was a new gallery, and you were cool or not depending on what you liked. It was a matter of private concern. So Frank here is subject to a larger hypnotism that he's not aware of from McLuhan's point of view. He's all pissed off. He doesn't like music. It's become a private concern that he's turned into a political operation. So that's a fair criticism of what Frank's doing. But Frank will rise above it.
What would you say were the effects of the Walkman and now everybody wearing headphones?
You mean 30 years ago when the Walkman came out? What was the effect of it?
Yes, like people are isolating themselves from the acoustic environment.
No, that's a good point. They were, whoever was that? That was Sony Walkman. So Sony marketed. They had read their McLuhan. They knew that music had become a private concern, a private bubble, a private gallery, and they made it up for people to have it. It was meant to be private. But it was before, in literate societies and before, music was tribal. It was a group concern. That shows you
It's the environment to the loss of privacy, and for example, in the cities, you are forced to even touch and smell the masses of people.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the way to keep your own bubble.
That's right. Keep your private identity. It becomes a literate music, which was ear, becomes eye motivated. You keep your privacy. And McLuhan said that the transistor radio in the 1560s was a way for the teenager to shut themselves off from the family and the rest of the world. It was a privacy bubble. So remember, radio is a hot medium. It enhances on some level the privacy issues, the isolation of the literate billiard ball personality. So yes, all of modern music is not for tribalism. It is for privacy. Now, you obviously have the phenomenon of instant cities like Woodstock where music becomes a tribal concentration camp. William Marion Thompson talks about this. So there's two things going on. Music is for tribal identity and for privacy. That means it's both. That means the hidden ground is tactile. All arts are becoming tactile. And so the phenomenon of consuming music, both collectively and privately, is a tactile situation. It's both and.
Yes, and with the electronic environment, there was this phenomenon that people lose their identity, and then they had these different types of music, different types of looks that go to that music. And then they have this illusion that they belong to something, to this gang or tribe or group.
They were retrieving.
Like that music.
They were retrieving the tribal oral culture. That was the content, but they were becoming what McLuhan said, mass man and virtualized and isolated and atomized was the hidden ground. They were becoming astronauts.
Yes, and in a way, Frank Zappa was an anti-environment again because he will mix all races, all musical genres, female and male.
Yeah.
So there is not like the look, and he's not into any trend. He's Frank Zappa. He's everything.
Yeah. Now you could say that he was a throwback to art and music as a private concern, and he presents himself that way. But we know that he doesn't have any particular music he's for. So that is not the accurate. He is not using music as a private concern. That is an anti-environment for the little kids that he's addressing, and for the classical music establishment that are still trying to hoik up music as a private concern. Now he says that here. He says, now people are listening because of his Freakout album. Sometimes they wonder what they're hearing and why it sounds like that. That means it's electronic compositional techniques. But sometimes they like it, as well as the ugliness and dissonance he put in there. Then he says, Top 40 radio is unethical, unmusical, and it stinks. But look what he says next. Classical music stations aren't much better. They all have very rigid, limited programming. So he's anti the acoustic space retrieval, either way, classical or pop. Whereas John Adams takes sides. He tries to compose within classical music.
He retrieves a lot, but
yes.
He alters these things because they're out of their context. And for example, he might change the lyrics, like Stairway to Heaven or is Hendrix song, Excuse Me While I Kiss This Guy. All the icons of culture.
At the same time, see, he's doing my chart. Remember, the chart's called the Tiny Note. Bob's anachronous Tiny Note. He is miming the quadrophenia of the Andromean because he's also a teacher. He turned on many teenagers and college students to classical history of the 20th century. Right? He did blatant LaRouchian teaching dynamic of content. As well as, see, he was doing LaRouche as a teacher. He was a satirist like McLuhan. He was a spiritualist like William Irwin Thompson in a new kind of way. And he was dealing with the virtual reality like Croker does. And he was a friend of Bob, so he's in the Dobbs squadron.
He's quadrophenic. He's really quadrophenic.
Quadrophenic.
All over.
Yeah.
He's all over the place. You can't put him down that he's this and this. He's always really... He was teaching, but on different angles, really radical at that time, if you think about it, in the 60s, how he was all over the place, but at the same time, he was really exposing the whole music business in his own unique way. He was all over the place.
He was in the environment to every form of culture.
Yes, yes.
And politics. So he says... The classical stations have very rigid, limited programming. And then he says, now here's where he's a tetrad manager. McLuhan said real art is programmed art. You know the effects before you create it. You know what you want to do. He's always stating what he's doing, why they were created. He says the mothers were created to fill most of the gap that exists between so-called serious music and the mass public. Wow. Really good music with advanced tendencies has been kept from the public at large. This includes classical and popular music. A filtering system of little old ladies selects the music played by symphony orchestras and on radio stations. And that's exactly what Nicholas Slonimsky said when he performed his avant-garde Edgar Varese kind of compositions. He conducted them at the Hollywood Bowl in the 30s. He said the old ladies who ran the musical appreciation culture of Hollywood fired him, and he never was a composer or conductor again. He became a writer of dictionaries of musical history. And John Cage said he attended those, he says this in this documentary, he attended those Hollywood Bowl concerts because I think he grew up in Los Angeles, and he said they changed his whole view of music. So they got to Cage. He performed them for a couple of weeks or whatever for a series, and he got to the next guy. And then changed music, then opened the world for Zappa, which then led to Ion, and then led to this series, this historical classroom we're creating right here. Praise Slonimsky, 80 years ago, he started it, because he knew Perez.
And you recognize many of the aspects of Zappa composition ideas, like synchrony, and all this anything, anytime, anywhere, for no reason at all. All these concepts that he was using for composing, you saw they were important, not only in a piece of music, but as broader concepts of understanding what's going on.
That's what Ion did. Ion does anything, anywhere, for no purpose at all to to point something out, to create an environment. I prepared the ground. I have updated Zappa's technique.
Yes, and also this strange phenomenon of synochrony. That is
yes.
Very important in your everyday life.
I have the most anomalies because I create people who have anomalies.
Yeah. Bob, I heard something yesterday that blew. It's funny how you and Roxana are doing Zappa. I was listening to a Melted Titanium, and you mentioned that Zappa used isotope.
Yes.
One of his interviews mentioned isotope, and that's brings it all full loop with ion. I mean, isotope. And how
that's right. Guess what it is, Bert? It's like a 1970 album after the band is broken up, so he's putting out a few albums with Mother's concerts from the 67, 68, 69 period. And there's a song called Toads of the Short Forest. I think that's what it is. And this Zappa scholar who got the gig of translating Zappa's music into Japanese. He's a British guy. He's a friend of Ben Watson. I met him in 2008 in England. Simon Prentice is his name. And he translated Frank's lyrics into Japanese, but that meant he could ask Frank, what did he mean by different things? And he also went on to translate Yoko Ono. He works for Yoko Ono, too. Anyways, he told me, this is back in 2008. It wasn't too public. He showed me his transcript. He asked Frank, what is the Toads of the Short Forest about? And he said, it's about isotopes. That's where he said isotopes. Now, how could the Toads of the Short Forest, maybe nature change? What does that mean? It's crazy, you know, isotope. Until ion shows up. Now we know.
Yes. Wow.
Nature was mutated by the
short forest.
The changing. Yeah, that's the burning of California's forests. It's all the stuff that Ian says is changing in nature. Everybody's turning into a toad in a short forest.
He had this concept of the big note that is like the matrix, the mother of invention, the frequency.
Right. That's right.
Ian is talking about all the time.
On Lumpy Gravy, made in '67, he has the character saying, you know, everything's a vibration. Everything's an extension of vibrations. So he says that. He's just actually taking, you know, a Brian Wilson Beach Boy leader song, Good Vibrations, and the year it comes out, Frank's got an album out saying, talking technically about it. Well, everything's a vibration, you know, talking as if it's science, which we would then leap to, just for a moment, here's Zappa, the Frank Zappa interview disc. They think this interview might have been conducted in early to mid-1984. So I'll just do a little gesture. Well, what it is, it's he's talking about his book, Them or Us, which is a pretty interesting book, and he has himself in there, unnamed, but he has a character named Frank Zappa walking around in the book, and it says, the bio says that you've got a book as well, Them or Us. I haven't seen it. Can you tell me something about it? He says, it's due off the press in 2 weeks in the United States, and it's 360-something pages, and I'm publishing it myself. The guy goes, oh? Now, I don't know if this is a fake interview or not, but he goes, oh? And then Zappa says, the first printing is 5,000 copies. And the guy says, or somebody says, can you tell me something about, what is it about? I mean, you cannot judge by the album, obviously. The story, he had an album at the time called Them or Us. The story has to be more cohesive, if I may say. And Frank says, the book is written. It's written. It's a book for people who hate to read. Now, think of the way. It's a book for people who hate to read, and it's written in the style of a screenplay so that each situation is described in terms of what a camera would see, what the physical action is, what the people say, and what they do. And so it takes you very quickly through some complicated situations where if you had written it as a normal book, it would be be like, and he goes, finger, like that. And he says, he probably makes a finger width gesture. It would be too thick, I guess he's saying. If you had written it as a normal, it would be like that, and he makes a wide gesture. And the guy goes, uh-huh. And then he says, Zappa says, and it's a fiction book, and it's very funny. And then the guy says, has it got anything to do with the album? I mean, can the album be used as a soundtrack to it? And he goes, well, the way it works is, the book is, you know what the unified field theory is? Okay, he's quoting modern physics. And the person says, I'm afraid not. Well, says Frank, in physics they have this thing that they've been looking for. It's a unified field theory that explains the interrelationship between how gravity works and atomic energy and all this stuff. They're looking for one equation that explains it all and makes it work, because right now there's contradictions. And let's just say that the book is like a unified field theory. So he means his own book is like a unified field theory that will hold together, and he lists off a whole bunch of his own songs: Billy the Mountain, Gregory Peccary, Joe's Garage, Them or Us, Thingfish. All these different stories. It shows you how they work together to make one long, really complicated story. And the Them or Us album is only one part of this major release that is coming out this year. There are 3 other albums that are released at approximately the same time. The Boulez album, the Francesco Zappa album. That's a guy who lived in the same years as Frank, 1763 to 1788, same career dates. And the Thingfish album. And the book relates. The Boulez album is not related to it, but all the rest of that stuff is related. And so if you read the book and listen to those 3, plus knowing from the past Joe's Garage, Billy the Mountain, Gregory Peccary, then it would make an awful lot of sense to you. But other than that, it's very hard to describe. It sounds like what I say, describing Ion or spinning his wake. So the guy says, the way you describe it, it comes as a summation, a culmination of what you've been working for the past 20 years, let's say. And he goes, well, no, it doesn't really work like that. See, it's not a summation. People, especially in Europe, when they want to know more about what the lyrics mean, if they can read English, the book would help them. Guy goes, uh-huh. And if they can't, it'll confuse them very much. Any possibility for the book being issued in this country? I don't know what country it's in. Since I'm paying to have it printed myself, I'll have to just see whether or not I can sell enough of them in the United States. I haven't even spoken to any publishers in unintelligible, you can't make out what he's saying. I took it to publishers in the United States, and they were afraid of it. So I said, quote, forget it. I'll just print it myself. See? Roxy had to do it himself again and sell it mail order.
Yeah.
But it's obvious that's what's published nowadays, says the interviewer. That anything serious, doesn't really, there's plenty of dross being printed nowadays as far as I can gather. And he says, well, when we talked to a U.S. publisher, they were more concerned that it looked like a book. And this doesn't look like a book. It looks like a screenplay. So they have taken a position that people won't read it because it doesn't say, quote, the leaves fell off the tree, unquote. And, quote, it's 5 o'clock, unquote. And it's all in paragraphs. Then he says, I personally don't like to read. And I've said in other interviews that for me, reading is about as much fun as standing in line at the passport window in the French airport. The guy starts laughing, so let's assume this is in Paris. The guy goes, that's very exciting. That's exciting. Basically for people who would enjoy the albums rather than for a literary audience. It's for people who enjoy the albums rather than for a literary audience. So it's a guide to his ear world. Then the guy, geez, how long is this? Oh, man. There's a later part I want to read, but just maybe there's probably a lot of good stuff.
Nowadays, maybe the younger generations are not aware of how hard it was to produce a record and distribute it. And because, for example, I did some music in the 80s in Mexico with some rock bands, and there was only one company doing all the distribution. And you had to get a contract with somebody because there was only 2 places where they will be pressing the records. And it was very expensive to do this. And now everybody can just burn their own CDs or just promote it as audio files on the internet. And and do your marketing.
Yeah, the kids have no idea of the work that went on.
Yeah, the struggle and the censorship that was you had to fight because you were not commercial enough. If you did something that was not what they thought was
to justify the cost of all the work.
Yeah, the cost. Yeah, it was too risky to spend all that money in something that might not sell.
Here's something that a person told me yesterday. The head of the UCLA, one of the major universities, I think in California, wrote an op-ed somewhere saying that the kids coming into universities can't do anything and they know nothing because their parents have helped them do their school projects, did the school projects, did their exams for them, did everything. And these kids get, because the parents say you got to get huge, really good marks, so the parents do all the work. And these kids get to university, they know fucking nothing. They don't know how to do anything. And so this university prof is saying, we got a real crisis here. We're making a civilization. Then she should have said, no wonder the Chinese are taking over. They still do shit. The kids got to freaking fucking perform. They're going to take over this country. But you've got, a university professor who says the parents are so fucked up that they are so keen on this iconic profile. Remember, tribal people, McLuhan says, must save face. They have to have their kids get a perfect mark, so the parents do all the work. That is fucking crazy. That's parents really working against you. You can't even develop an ability to do anything. It's way worse than what Frank said. So I had not heard that. That's pretty amazing, eh?
That's a recent statement, Bob?
Yeah, it was an op-ed a couple of days ago. You probably could Google it and find it.
Wow.
University professor says kids are fake kids. They have no brains. They never learned anything, even though they got perfect marks. Let's see if I Google it. University president complains about parents. Let's see if that brings up anything. Yeah, this is it. Top article. They're called helicopter parents are ruining college in the Washington Post. You know what a helicopter parent is? That's what the person told me. They hover over their parent, guiding everything.
Wow.
How helicopter parents are ruining college students. And then they have a picture of Emory University. We own that fucking university. Me personally, I owned them. Anyways, I can post that. They're ruining my fucking university I invested in. Anyways, let's carry on. Let's go back to the past where it was comfortable, where there was an actual genius running amok. Beg your pardon?
Do you have online courses on McLuhan?
Do I have a line course on McLuhan?
Online.
Do I have an online course? Yes. This show is an online course on McLuhan. What? Are you asking? There are online courses about McLuhan, I think.
Yeah, you say you own the university.
I own Emory University, yes. Emory University is in Georgia.
You should start implementing real curriculum for people.
There's nobody there. These kids aren't human. They not only have no soul, they don't even have 5 bodies. They never even got made. We're not wasting our time. It's just another part of the stuff emptying.
They lived.
What'd you say?
They lived.
They lived. That's right. They lived. Till they got to about grade 4, and then their parents took over. So we were just reading what? The tree. Yes, okay. It goes on about the book, but there's a lot of good stuff, but I want to jump ahead. Listen to this. They ask him, What is the one about a guitar? What is the one they use now? It's a customized Stratocaster. The only thing on this guitar that is Fender is the body. Everything else on it is custom. It has a custom neck. It has customized electronics, custom pickups, Floyd Rose tremolo. Person says, do you use it in the studio as well as on the stage? Zappa says, I just started using this particular guitar in July. And usually when I go on tour, I take a number of guitars and I change them during the show. The ones I brought on the 82 tour, I changed a lot. On this tour, I just play this one guitar. So that would be 84. And the person says, and the other part of the same article is going to be your thoughts on some of your contemporaries and your people, if you don't mind. People like Chuck Berry. Frank goes, Chuck Berry? ? Chuck Berry? Well, I used to like Chuck Berry when I was in high school. Songs like Havana Mill and Wee Wee Hours, which were the flip sides of the hits that he had, the more bluesy things. So, of course, he didn't like the hits. He liked the other sides. Chuck Berry's main innovation besides that duck walk choreography was the multiple string guitar solos. The lines were harmonizing because he was playing on two strings at once. There was another guitar player who used to do that named Jimmy Nolan, who I had a lot of respect for. Then they say, B.B. King? I don't like B.B. I saw him on television before I went on this tour, and he was still blue. Blue, I guess that means playing blues. Like he specialized too much in that. And then the interviewer says, oh, yeah, I've seen him recently, and I thought he was amazing. Keith Richards. Frank says, I don't know anything about Keith Richards. Then they ask about Jimi Hendrix. I knew Jimmy, and remember, Jimmy gave him Zappa his famous guitar that burnt down in some concert in Florida or something. So Hendrix is on the cover of We're Only for the Money, so they were friends. So Frank says, I knew Jimmy, and I think that the best thing you could say about Jimmy was, there was a person who shouldn't use drugs. That's the best thing you can say about Jimmy. So then they ask about John McLaughlin. Frank says, I met John. I think he's a great guitar player, and I think that he's probably done a lot to educate American audiences to some aspects of Eastern music that they wouldn't have come into contact with before. We did a tour with McLaughlin and old Mahavishnu. We did 11 concerts with them. How about Lowell George, who was in the Mother's Invention in the late 60s, then went on to form Little Feat, and, of course, died in 79 or so. Lowell George. There's another guy who shouldn't use drugs. Don't know if he was dead by then. Then they say, Eric Clapton? I know Eric. He was involved with We're Only for the Money, too, I think. I know Eric. I haven't seen him in years and years. There's another guy who shouldn't use drugs. Imagine saying this. Roxy gets interviewed. Pierre Boulez, we think, he shouldn't use drugs. And John Adams, he shouldn't use drugs. That's what you could say, Roxy, when you get interviewed. No, you should say, there's a guy who should use drugs. That's what you say. You do the opposite, Frank. Jeff Beck. Frank says, one of my favorite guitar players on the planet. From a melodic standpoint, and just in terms of the conception of what he plays, he's fabulous. I like Jeff. Rory Gallagher. We worked 2 jobs with Rory Gallagher on this tour, and long pause. And he goes, he's still playing the blues. That's what Frank complained about back in 1970, that all these blues guys, Led Zeppelin guys, would promoting, including Keith Richards, promoting B.B. King and stupid old-fashioned blues. There's Frank making fun of African-American music. He's there to stop that hypnosis. So he doesn't like Gallagher because he's still playing the blues. He's still being blue. Not cool around Frank. Frank plays the blues better than anybody. But he changes it. Makes a new kind of blues, right? He
even said jazz smells funny.
Right. What was that song?
It's really... but smells funny.
Right. Let's see. Where's that song? What was that called? I don't know if this takes too long. The only time I ever heard Frank... What?
What happened to Dave? No, it's it.
Oh, they all went home. They all fell asleep. Man, gee, we've been on here for like 5 hours. You know, they've got the stamina. Nobody's here. It's just you and that other guy from Switzerland. It's the only people here.
So Dave was on earlier, huh? Dave?
Yes, he was supposed to be part of this, but I don't program it properly. We end up doing too much other stuff. Now, is this the one? Is this how it begins?
Kansas City.
That's how the blues should be done.
Yeah.
That just begins. I remember you loved that song. You requested that a year ago.
Yes, yes.
That's a caress.
That's a caress?
Caress? Caress?
What's that mean? Stroking?
Mm. Yeah.
Hey, that's pretty cool. I get you. As Garrett would say, I get you, Bobby. I get you, Bobby. Yeah, I get you, boy. I get you, girl. Yeah, a caress. He's caressing the blues.
Right.
Roxy, the rock critic, the blues
Caressing the air molecules.
Yes, he's caressing the air, sculpting the air molecules. Okay, so look at this. Rory Gallagher, well, he's still, with a frown, he's still playing the blues. Jimmy Page. I don't know anything about Jimmy Page. He's like the top guitarist in the Android meme, right? Frank never heard of him. Peter Green. Oh, and he does Stairway to Heaven. That's Jimmy Page, isn't it? He doesn't even know who he did. But this is 1984. He didn't do maybe Stairway to Heaven until a few years later. But like I told Steve, he didn't listen to rock. And he only did these songs because people in his band requested them. You know, he didn't even know what they were. He once saw a Michael Jackson Thriller video about 1983, and he goes, "Who's that?" Pretty good production values in the video. Okay, Peter Green. I don't know him either. Who's Peter Green? I've heard the name. I don't know much about him. Peter Green. Who did he go? Peter Green. Fleetwood Mac, I guess. So he says, I don't know him either. Jerry Garcia. We did one concert with Garcia on this tour, but we were the opening act, and I didn't see any of his set. So, no contact with the Grateful Dead. Then he goes, they say Peter Townsend. I've met Pete, but I don't know what I can say about his guitar playing. Guess he's being polite. Now, Robert Fripp is one of those avant-garde guys that came in after the Mothers in the late 60s and was influenced by Zappa. So they asked him, Robert Fripp. I've never heard of Robert Fripp. Now, Richie Blackmore, isn't he Deep Purple that did the song about Zappa, Smoke on the Water, right? About the burning down in 71 in Switzerland, in Zurich. So they go, Richie Blackmore. I have met Richie, too, and ... I'm not really familiar with the work of these people because you have to understand I'm not a pop consumer and I don't listen to a lot of these. So he doesn't even know about the guy who did a song about him. You know, Steve was telling me, how come Zappa knew nothing about Carlos Santana? And so I was explaining to him, well, Frank didn't consume pop. And he said, I just can't believe he couldn't know about Carlos. And so I didn't find anything on Carlos to send to him. But then this thing I just found today does have something that's coming up. So the guy finally gives up and says, what do you listen to? Okay? He says, what the fuck, man? You're supposed to be a rock musician. Now, what the hell are you listening to? Well, what I do is I take cassettes with me on the road because sometimes you're sitting in the hotel room and you just want to listen to something. But what I take is not rock and roll. I like Chopin. I have Purcell. I have Webern. I have Rez. I have Bulgarian music. I don't listen to rock and roll. Now, isn't that amazing? He's the best rocker in the world. They don't listen to it. Well, McLuhan has a quote from Mozart. They asked him what kind of music they liked. He said, no music. The composers they're not embedded in it. They're not embedded in what you think they should be.
They're composing, and it's very
they're making.
Yeah.
Yes, they're making. It's like me. I have hours of me with the best mediums in the world, the best source of information. Do you believe any of it, Bob? No. I'm not consuming. I'm making. I don't consume mediums. I present them. It's compositions. Same thing, right?
Yeah.
Never been said before. So then the guy goes, well, he has written, Carlos Santana? And Frank says, we worked with Carlos Santana on Cologne in 1980 or 81, and it was a similar situation. We did 2 shows at the Sport Palace in Cologne. They opened the first show, we closed it. Then we opened the second show, and they closed it. So I never heard him play. And he says, so the guy says, as you said, you don't listen to popular music, so I don't expect you know Eddie Van Halen, who I know Dweezil liked Eddie Van Halen. I knew that way back when Dweezil was 12 or something. So this is around that time. So I expect you don't know. I don't expect you know Eddie Van Halen. And Frank says, I do know Eddie. He comes over to the house because he hangs out with my son. So the guy's always got it backwards. The one guy he predicts that Frank didn't know, he's like a foster son to Frank. Comes over to the house because he hangs out with Dweezil. So then the guy says, I see, but do you know him as a guitar player? Frank says, oh, yeah. He and my son play together, and he's fabulous. But there's another guy who shouldn't use drugs. Now, that's a very skillful statement about drugs. Dean Latimer, who wrote in the East Village Other under Walter Boert in the late 60s, he became a friend. And he used to do heroin. He says, it's the neurotics who do heroin are wrong. You have to know how to do heroin. And if you do it, it's not a problem. He claimed he knew how to do it. So if you're a neurotic idiot, you can't take the high decibels of heroin. We know what that means. Then if you can't take the high, you got to be a superior ascended being to take heroin, or if you're a population to have television collectively. So if you're little people, you shouldn't use drugs and you shouldn't have television. Doesn't mean they're bad. Just you're not worthy of having them. So then the guy says, I presume you don't know The Edge from U2. Frank goes, The Edge? The guy goes, yeah. Frank goes, no. And then the guy goes, from Big Country. Frank goes, no. So he didn't know about U2.
Bob, you put out.
What?
You move your telephone.
Oh, am I here now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what was the last words? I said that's the early 80s, but by 1990, everybody should know about The Edge, right, from U2. Maybe he wouldn't know about him in the early 80s. Didn't they start in the 80s?
I don't know.
Okay. So, the guy says, or it could be a woman, what would be your thoughts on the original guitar playing of the Mothers, i.e. yourself? What's that mean? What would be your thoughts on the original guitar playing of the Mothers, i.e. yourself? So he's saying, what are your thoughts about yourself? And Frank says, well, there's one other guy whose work I know who should be included in that list, who I respect, and that's Alan Holdsworth. So Alan Holdsworth is a British jazz guitarist and composer, jazz fusion guitarist. He's acclaimed for the complexity of his compositional and improvisational work as well as his astounding technical skill. According to an interview in 1989, Holdsworth was Zappa's favorite rock and roll guitar player. Zappa also expressed his admiration for Holdsworth in other interviews. So he doesn't seem to be identified with any band. Alan Holdsworth, you guys know him?
No.
Oh?
Alan Holdsworth.
No.
Okay. Complex jazz guy that Roxy never heard of. He never got to Mexico.
No, I was listening to...
Or you were playing. Maybe you opened for him, and you didn't stay around to hear him because you were exhausted from your horrible 2 weeks in the rock world. Playing old, repeating songs. That's what... She said it was boring after a month. Bert.
Oh, wow.
He couldn't stand playing the same song.
You understand when you are in that environment and you have to rehearse a lot and do concerts, it's like you don't want to listen to silly songs. It's like you need more complex stimulation.
Right.
And I suppose he will be listening to contemporary composers like Boulez and Pierre Schaeffer and all these.
Right.
Roxana, how long did you play rock and roll? How long?
Like 10 years.
Wow. But you found the board
15.
after 1 month, but you played it.
No, that's what she reported when she went back in 2012 and did it for a couple months. And they were being groomed to be a big band, a big rock
yes,
act.
I thought I wanted to do it again, but then when I did it, I realized it's not what I want to do.
Yeah, they had all these rules. They couldn't say anything in the interviews. They were very policed.
Oh.
Yes.
By the corporate managers. But you did Mexican club music like from 15 to 25, right? 10 years?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
She doesn't like to remember it. All her buddies died from drug overdoses. They couldn't handle the high decibels that she was playing. They didn't deserve to hang out with Roxy. They tried to keep up with her by taking drugs.
So
yeah, the whole environment, the drugs, the alcohol, the playing late in the night, and all this, it's a lot of work. And for example, Zappa was also doing the whole organization of the performances, getting the tours, the planning.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of work. He was doing everything.
I think he streamlined it when he got into doing TV interviews late 80s and getting ready to run for president. He Scott Tunis, I think, he had guys running the rehearsals, and he would show up, halfway through the rehearsals. So he didn't do the grind that he was doing earlier. He started to, stop being a musician, start doing other things, planning his global art form, started working with Russian business, He had a whole agenda to keep Russia from not falling back into communism in the early 90s.
Damn. You going to cover that later? I mean, in this series?
Eventually. Yeah, this series shouldn't end. I want to
I know,
something.
like, for example, in East Germany and in the former Czechoslovakia, he was quite popular because he was criticizing the United States. So in Europe, because he was so critical of the society, he was maybe even more popular than in America.
Yes,
I'm not sure.
Have you blipped out?
What do you think?
We're going to hear you.
Hey.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
Hey. Yes, I have the impression that there was a time when Zappa was even more popular in Europe than in America because he was critical about the policies of the United States. But on the other side, I think he was like a patriot. And he even wanted to be president.
Hey, can you hear me? I want to respond.
Yes.
Yeah, not very clear.
Not very clear.
No, you're fading now.
Hear me?
Yes. Now you're loud.
Okay, I'm good?
Clear.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I won't move. And I'm sitting here frozen for what? 5 hours? Holding the stupid phone to my hand, to my ear. I don't have my headphones on. I have it home, so I'm doing the duty beyond duty thing. So as early as 1970 or 71, and I think in a Downbeat interview, the interviewer said, you seem to be more popular in Europe than here. And he says, well, I don't want to be just appreciated by some European aesthetes. He even puts that down. Because his goal was to take over the United States. He called them, European aesthetes. He didn't want to be that to be his limited audience. So, yes, he was more popular. And I was going to say he's the Jerry Lewis of music composition. You know how Europeans love Jerry Lewis? I don't know if they consider Lewis a satire in American life. Maybe they do, but you know about that? The popularity of Jerry Lewis, a corny comedian of the 50s? Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was gypsy guy.
Godard and those guys liked him for some reason. The French auteurs and French New Wave. They made a big deal out of Jerry Lewis's American documentaries, they would consider it. So Zappa was the Jerry Lewis of European or musical composition for the European. He was a comedian, so to speak. Anyways, so he says, the guy says, I was going to ask you who was your favorite guitar player. He says, well, my original favorite guitar player was Johnny Guitar Watson, not from a technical standpoint, but from listening to what his notes meant in the context in which they were played. And also Guitar Slim, who was the first guitar player that I ever heard that had distortion, even during the 50s. In a strange way, I think I probably derived more of my style from Guitar Slim's approach to the guitar from the solos that I heard then. Then the guy says, you still haven't told me your thoughts on yourself as a guitar player. Frank says, well, I do something very different on the guitar. I don't so much play the guitar as make up stuff. Sounds like Ion. The notes that I play during the solo, I conceive it as a composition that's happening instantly at the time that it's ... You have 2 minutes to fill up, or you have 9 minutes to fill up, or whatever it is. A piece of time, which is anywhere from 2 to 9 minutes long, and you're going to decorate it with notes. You're going to make a composition in there. The quality of that composition is determined by what you're physically capable of playing at that time, what the rhythm section will allow you to play, and whether or not the keyboard player who's applying the harmonic climate is going to mess up what you're playing by sticking in his favorite jazz chord right there. These are all the dangers a person faces when improvising a guitar solo.
Wow.
There are some guitar players who will practice their guitar solos and they will always be perfect, and they will be the same every night. I don't do that. When it's time to play, I don't know what I'm going to play until I start doing it. That's Bob-like, man. And then an idea will pop up, and I'll just develop it in the same way I develop an idea or a piece of paper, except the same way I develop an idea on a piece of paper, except that I don't have to wait to hear it. I get to hear it as it's coming out. Now think of his fantastic guitar solos, and he's making it up.
Yes, but this
what do you think of that, Roxy?
Talking. Really?
That's right. I do the same thing.
I think it's the same. It's you compose in the moment.
I get mad when the harmonic I get mad when the harmonic climate is ruined by some asshole putting the wrong fucking idea in the middle of the point I'm making.
That's it.
Yeah. I think we could use this to explain why I'm grumpy.
Music is a conversation, and there are styles of playing an instrument, like instrumental, but there is also like what is called the vocal. And yes, it's like the instrument is really talking.
Right. Awesome. So then he says, there are some guitar players who will practice their guitar. Oh, we did that. Okay. And then the person says, and the last question on this section is, what would be the future of guitar? Or rather, how do you see the future of guitar in the increasingly synth and keyboard orientation to music? He says there will always be a market for people who want to hear guitars squealing and oinking and bending and twanging and making sounds like guitars are supposed to make. There is a market of people who are interested in fashion, and they will begin hating all those other old guitar sounds in favor of guitar sounds which are not like guitar sounds but are played in guitar position but sound like synthesizers. There's a market for that. There are people who want to hear, but I don't think that will be the ultimate future of the guitar. Then the guy says, I would like to ask you two questions. One is, and names an album by John Lennon and Yoko Ono, Sometime in New York City. I want to ask you questions about it. The John Lennon and Yoko Ono album. And then he doesn't say anything, so Frank says, what about it? So the guy says, what was it? How did it come about and all that? He says, the day before the show, a journalist in New York City woke me up. Now, this would be June 4th and 5th, 1971. I was at Zappa's house this night. I was with Motorhead. Jim Stewart. I went up to visit Frank, and he wasn't there. I didn't know where he was, and so I spent that night in the little cottage on the cover of Hot Rats, the second Grand Wazoo album, or the first one. There was two albums of that period, recorded when he was laid up with his busted leg and everything. So that night, now I know that Dave Wally, my friend who wrote the first book on Zappa, was at this meeting. I think he witnessed it, and I don't remember who the journalist was. I don't think it was David Wally. So Frank says, the day before the show, a journalist in New York City woke me up, knocked on the door, and is standing there with a tape recorder and goes, quote, Frank, I'd like to introduce you to John Lennon, unquote. You know, waiting for me to gasp and fall on the floor and say, quote, well, okay, come on in. So he thought that Frank would be very impressed. So then Frank said, and we sat around and talked. And I think the first thing Lennon said to me was, quote, now you've said this, Roxy, you're not as ugly as I thought you would be, unquote. First thing Lennon said.
People often make that remark to him.
Yeah, that's right. And so then Frank says, so anyways, I thought John had a pretty good sense of humor, so I invited him to come down and jam with us at the Fillmore East. We'd already booked in a recording truck because we were making the Live at the Fillmore album. That's the one, just a white blank cover that he predicts in an interview. You know, making a live recording will come back, he says. Making the Live at the Fillmore album at the time. After they had sat in with us, an arrangement was made that we would both have access to the tapes. He wanted to release it with his mix, and I had the right to release it with my mix. So that's how that one section came about on the Lennon album, Sometime in New York City. Then he says, the bad part is there's a song that I wrote called King Kong, which we played that night. And I don't know whether it was Yoko's idea or John's idea, but they changed the name of the song to Jam Rag, gave themselves writing and publishing credit on it, stuck it on an album, and never paid me. It was obviously not a jam session song. It's got a melody. It's got a bass line. It's obviously an organized song. It was a little bit disappointing. I've never released my version of the mixes of that night. And the guy says, do you ever intend to? One day, yeah. But it would be drastically different because there were things that were edited out of their version and certain words that were being sung that were removed because of the editorial slant that they wanted to apply to the material, and I have a slightly different viewpoint on it. Now, I think what happened is the mothers were satirizing Yoko Ono when she was inside her bag. Remember, she used to sing inside a bag? And they make fun of her. And I think that's what John Lennon and Yoko edited out of their mix. But it is on a later presentation by Frank, years later. you get to hear it. And then the final question, and the last question is, you've been promising a 10-volume set of the Soots. Now, the Soots are, I think, the name of the band when he first met them that he turned into the Mothers in 64, 65. And he goes, no, not the Soots, no. The Soots don't have 10 volumes worth of material, but what will come out is, now that I own all the masters for my stuff, the first box that has the first 7, all the early Mother stuff, plus the mystery disc, which would have some Soots material on it. That is now ready to release in the United States. The 10-record set that you referred to was like live recordings of the early Mother's invention. I can release that, but I'm not going to until after I re-release the whole catalog of the basic albums that I just got back from this lawsuit, and that's coming out. 7 records per year with 1 box about every 5 years. And then the guy says, I'd like to listen to them. Thank you very much. Frank says, okay. It says, as with the first transcription, the interviewer...
Okay.
Possibly conducted... What? You said something,
okay. Only okay.
Yes. Due to the context and the accent of the interviewer, this was probably conducted somewhere in Germany. While in the first interview, it was obvious that the interviewer was a fan, this one, it seems equally clear that this interview knows very little of Frank and his work. He's referring to an incorrect bio for information on asking some of his questions. This interview is fairly hard to transcribe in places because of the poor quality of the original recording. I have tried to present it as accurately as possible. The CD that this material comes from contains positively no copyright information of any sort. The text was transcribed by Robert Moore on Saturday, December 11th at 11:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. A mere week since Frank died at the much too early age of 52. So this was transcribed a week after Frank died. So this is a rare interview. I've never read it before. Okay, so are we? What more can we say? Oh, I know what I want to do. I want to play one of the, quote from a first interview, the political part of Frank. So we got to go, magazine, is that it? Magazine, articles. All right.
Yes, I think
so we did
the first Zappa program
interview
with only talking.
That's right. Nothing but talking. I didn't finish. Now listen to this. We didn't finish this one. This is the first interview, December 8th, 65, for something called Hitline. And it has a radio acronym, so maybe it's a radio station newsletter. So remember, he talked about most people today are plastics. They have no soul. And then he says, oh, look, we didn't read this. This is good. The Mothers consider themselves, says the journalist, the Mothers consider themselves a group of singing social workers exercising free speech through music. They have found that through music they could speak more freely to reach more people. So Frank says, quote, we consider ourselves therapeutic workers massaging the brains of people dancing to our music with the lyrics to our songs. We sing songs with feeling like they were done in the late 50s in El Monte Legion Stadium, not the commercial noise that's being put out today, said Frank. So here he is talking like Reuben the Jets 2.5 years before the Reuben the Jets concept shows up, right? We're massaging the brains of people dancing to our music with the lyrics to our songs. We sing songs with feeling like they were done in the late 50s. Now, a lot of people think Frank doesn't sing with feeling. He sings fucking horribly. It's just noise. Right? But anyways, what's Frank know? He's just channeling. So then he says, Bob Dylan is the only guy who really feels what he is saying. Barry McGuire is a phony. He doesn't mean what he says, continued Frank. So he likes Bob Dylan at that point. Then the journalist says, some examples of lyrics from the Mother songs are, quote, take your little white plastic boots and melt them down and send them back to the shoe store. Take your little white plastic hat and crumple it up and send it back to the hat store. Those are lyrics of the Mother songs. Imagine Frank Sinatra singing stuff like that. Right? Wouldn't that be cool?
But in a way, he was trying to do what you're doing. He often said it was a therapy, that music is the only thing that really delivers the goods. And it was like the only way to survive industrial society and how things are. It was really like the only aspect of humanity that could save us. So
music.
He was trying to do what you are doing.
Right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Because there was a key word that got knocked out, right, Bert? And you were saying, what was your first sentence? He was trying to do something to society? Massage.
No, like society. He often said his music was therapy. Therapeutical.
Yes. Yeah. And he was anticipating the new song. He did a good job of filling in the new song before the new song showed up. Yeah.
I mean, he saw that everything is frequency, everything is vibrating. He said that everything is vibration.
Well, he had a character say it. But he was aware different media changed the harmonic climates of the... He had his way of saying the medium was the message for the vibration. The context of the environment affected the vibration. Right? Wrong?
Right. Everything happening at the same time is like... the only environment that even gives us the illusion of privacy is music. The only place in which we can escape to this bubble of sound that...
That's why he's a tactile artist. He went to
still have some sacred place or some cave or some place we can retire to.
That's what he's provided?
I think you moved.
Oh, okay. I think that's what's provided. A safe cave?
Yeah, you're not... Yeah, there. Yeah.
He does have a picture of him in the 1968 Roll